I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
Potential harms of AI extend to serious concerns over misinformation and disinformation, the entrenching of bias and discrimination, surveillance and invasion of privacy, fraud and other violations of human rights. And without entering into a host of doomsday scenarios, it is already clear that the malicious use of AI could undermine trust in institutions, weaken social cohesion, and threaten democracy itself.
And here we are for the first time, really in human history, with something that's going to be far more intelligent than us. So it's not clear to me we can actually control such a thing, but I think we can aspire to guide it in a direction that's beneficial to humanity. But I do think it's one of the existential risks that we face, and it's potentially the most pressing one.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong, and we want to be vocal about that. We want to work with the government to prevent that from happening, but we try to be very clear-eyed about what the downside case is and the work that we have to do to mitigate that.
Mark Boris Andrijanić, bivši slovenski ministar za digitalnu transformaciju, nas je gost u serijalu N1 Disinfo, a sada, Mark, radite u jednoj od velikih AI globalnih kompanija. We will switch to English because it's maybe easier for us, even though you are our neighbor and Slovenian. I want to ask you, people, when you go out, the talk of the town is AI. We won't talk about AI in its full content, but we will talk about it in terms of disinformation and our democracy resilience. So from your perspective, you've been in government and you are now in private sector, but in the US. How do you see the role of AI for our democracies?
First of all, you're right. This is today everyone's favorite topic. Everyone loves to talk about it, although not many people really understand it. It's a very advanced and complicated technology, so yeah, it's a mystery for many of us. I would say that the public conversation around AI is very similar in the US as it is in Europe and in our countries. We all see it as an amazing new technology that carries a lot of risks for our privacy, for our democracy, and for our mental health. So for our democracies, obviously, there is a bit of a risk there. We've seen a proliferation of AI-enabled disinformation, especially after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. You may remember, but just a couple of days after Russians attacked Ukraine, there was a deepfake video of President Zelensky allegedly urging Ukrainians to stop fighting and surrender.
Бути президентом виявилося не так вже й легко. Я змушений приймати складні рішення.
But we've seen also much more subtle and believable attempts with AI-empowered disinformation across Central and Eastern Europe and the world. So I think we're still grappling with how to counter this kind of threats. They are problematic because they're easily scalable. This kind of disinformation is very believable because it looks like a person, it speaks like a person, it transfers a message that can be very nuanced, very believable. and it does all of this at scale. So you can deploy, millions of AI chatbots in an hour, which means that you're getting the kind of scale that's difficult to counter oftentimes. So who carries the responsibility? First of all, it's the big social media platforms, because they're the primary vehicle for the spread of this kind of information, and they're doing that already. So they have their own AI systems that are battling the other, let's say, the dark AI systems.
They have it, they're trying to have it or trying to implement, maybe to be more correct, because
not always
we don't
successfully,
see that. Yeah.
We know that. And what has struck me, especially in the Ukrainian context, it turned out that these big platforms had very few content moderators in our part of the world, in countries of Central and Eastern Europe that are, I would say, at the forefront of Russian disinformation. We realized that even some of the biggest platforms don't have native-speaking content moderators in places like Czech Republic, which is not a small country, let alone the Baltic states or Slovenia and Croatia, which is
Balkans,
unacceptable.
which is out of EU, for example.
Exactly. I think they have always been looking at us as, a very small market, almost like a statistical error. So I don't think they've been dedicating enough resources to build a network that could basically help them counter this kind of spread of disinformation. To be fair, I think they've done great progress since then. I think that time was a big wake-up call, not just for our societies, but also for the big tech companies. So they're doing much more in this area, but the fight is never over.
Artificial intelligence.
人工智能 искусственный интеллект.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, Killmonger was right. Or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward, age of information, is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia.
One of the real changes in just the last sort of year and a half has been that a lot of developments in AI world were sort of in the world of the nerds and the world of the specialists, right? And then there were products that are sort of occasionally would make it for more mass consumption. But with the arrival of generative AI technologies that both pertain to text, but also now visuals and sound, and making that available to everybody. So no longer through an expensive and very hard to program and figure out type of approach to this, but really something that is at the fingertips for every one of us once we have a smartphone in our hands. That is a real game changer. That technology is not really new, but it allows all of us to be producers and users of AI technologies. And that is meaningful, especially when we look at something like misinformation and disinformation. We have had a long training of our brains and our minds to think that everything that is information is produced by humans. And we have over the last years gone through a better understanding of saying, well, there are also humans and actors out there that have ill intents, that are, deliberately spreading information that is inaccurate, and they do so with malign intent. But now the challenge will become over the next years that we can produce so much content that is inauthentic, and it is both sound, it is visuals, and it is text, that we can basically flood internet, so to speak, with all this content, and that will make it very hard for us, many of us, to judge what content is authentic. So I'm not saying, a question of here whether something is truthful or not, but simply whether it is made by a human or whether it is something that is auto-generated. That is a real significant shift in the AI development, that so many of us now have these technologies basically at our fingertips.
Sam fenomen nije nov. Mislim, Stalin je još davnih dana photoshopirao političke oponente nakon likvidacije iz fotografije. Hollywood naravno je pomoću različitih trikova je znači fejkao nekakvu prikazanu stvarnost za prikazivanje publici. Ono što je novo naravno je što to sad mogu napraviti ja sa $10 u džepu i za to mi treba otprilike 30 minuta. Znači po meni je to ono što mislim da je najveći izazov kako da nam se ne dogodi da ljudi koji su tek sa, ajmo reći, banalnom tehnologijom usporedbi sa umjetnom inteligencijom uspjeli povjerovati da je Zemlja ravna ploča. Mislim da je zadatak skužiti kako da se ne dogodi opet slična situacija.
It is indeed very important to acknowledge that, of course, it is not the first time that we in human history have been faced with challenges of propaganda or people trying to deceive us. But typically, communication technologies have been in the hands of just a few organizations or a few stakeholders. And of course, we have also, as societies, always tried to say, okay, this is important and meaningful. Can we think of ways of regulating that? Whether that was to be allowed to print newspapers, whether that was holding radio waves, whether that was allowed to be on the antenna for television. So there's always been a thought process on the side of society to say, how can we think about these quite powerful technologies and maybe see that they are not open and available for everybody, but you need to comply to specific rules when you use these technologies. With AI, and especially these models that are so easy to also use as even individual citizens or just small groups of individuals, that is a real change, right? Because now you can access an area, for example, online, and really generate content at a mass level in a very, very high pace. There are some projections that are saying that even just a few years from now, we could be looking at something like 90% of everything that is online being produced by artificial intelligence. Can you just imagine what it's like to go through information of your telephone and you have to maybe take as a starting point that 90% of what you see is not generated by humans? It flips also the discussion that we have about mis and disinformation, where we've been very much focused on saying, oh, here's a problem and here's something that might not be correct or not right. But now, going forward, what we need is maybe thinking much more about labeling and making visible what is authentic content, what has actually been verified by journalistic organizations, for example, simply because when we consume information on phones, and there's so much information that could be inauthentic, finding and sifting through the work and the information that has been verified and has been produced according to, for example, journalistic standards is going to be a massive challenge. And that is really something that I believe is very different compared to these previous technologies that really require technical skills, licenses, and also had a much clearer set of rules of the game, which are not yet there in the AI world. There are, of course, attempts in the European Union and other places to regulate the use of AI, but it is still not here, and the jury is definitely not out whether or not it will be an effective regulation or not.
Mislim da je izazov zapravo u distribuciji lažnog sadržaja. S tim da neke stvari su, po meni se čini da recimo ova deep pornografija puno veći i opasniji izazov za pojedinca i mislim da ćemo tu pogotovo da će u tome biti puno više problema, recimo na nekoj osobnoj razini i na pitanju pogotovo žena sa te strane.
Today we will be announcing the AI, it's a charter for AI and journalism that I chaired a committee of professionals and experts in this to try to figure out how news organizations and journalists can work together with this new AI. This is a critical moment for news organizations and journalism. We're under attack on all sides. Trust has eroded because of the structural design of social media platforms. The first contact with AI, with artificial intelligence, is actually social media. And we have not addressed those harms. If you are marginalized in the real world, if you're a woman, LGBTQ+, you are further marginalized online. This is where you have more than 300 Nobel laureate civil society groups signing something called the 10-point action plan. And that boils down to three things: stop surveillance for profit, stop coded bias, and the last one is critical. Journalism as an antidote to tyranny.
Yes, our voice is heard, but our voice is only one of 1,000 of other voices, and unfortunately the real big tech companies, they have a lot of lobbyists, and maybe even the media houses have a lot of lobbyists paying them, but far less than lobbyists for the tech companies. And the journalist organizations like the unions and other organizations, of course they're much smaller, and we work with only very few people, and so it's very difficult to get our voice to the politician making process. I mean, we do the best we can, but of course there's like other stakeholders that have much more money, much more power, much more people, and they're trying to influence the policy in their way, and not which is not always good for journalism, and which is not always good for the society.
Yeah, we have a real challenge because, of course, when judging information, we have been sort of trained through media literacy programs and these kind of things to try and be mindful sometimes about what it is that we are seeing, and think twice before you share it, and these kind of things. But we also know that we humans, part of our brain is also simply hardwired to like and engage with content that has opinions and views that we agree with. So we might share or like something that we believe that we agree with, and without doing the sort of critical reflection, is this accurate? Does it come from a good source? Do I really want to share that in the information network, etc.? Simply because we like to be engaging with viewpoints that we like, and we also like to get angry and disappointed and sort of outraged about things that we don't like. So there is a challenge with all information that some of it feeds into our brain in the way that we want to engage with it because we like it, and we also want to really express our dislike of it regardless of whether or not we've done that sort of additional check. And with AI and with so much information coming at us, even though that we would be maybe trained to be more critical about information, we will have so much content at our hand that we will need to judge on a sort of almost continuous basis. And one of the potential biggest downside of these new AI developments is that some of the distrust that we have could grow too, right? Because if we get so trained in saying, "Ooh, I don't know if this is made by a human, is it authentic or not?" we actually know from research that can also lead over to and give spillover effects, so that we start distrusting also some of the content that has been produced according to journalistic standard or has been coming from sources that we would usually say is trustworthy. So the AI challenge is also a challenge of how do we maintain trust levels and not just become distrustful of everything.
Prvo sam radio dugi niz godina u industriji, u telekomunikacijama, radio sam na komunikacijskim aplikacijama, su nešto slično poput WhatsAppa, i onda je došlo vrijeme kada je se po prvi put u javnosti čulo za umjetnu inteligenciju, to u negativnom kontekstu, tijekom skandala Cambridge Analytica, koja je bila upletena u izbore u Americi kada je Trump pobjedio. Nakon toga se dogodio Brexit, gdje su bili upleteni. I onda sam zapravo shvatio koliko umjetna inteligencija je moćna i koliko toga će se moći još u budućnosti napraviti. Htio sam biti dio toga. S druge strane me zanimala psihologija i onda sam zapravo spojio te dvije stvari.
Osim same pretrage entiteta, ovdje možemo ugraditi dodatne varijable kao jesu li se dva pojma pojavljivala istovremeno, koji se više pojavljivao u određeno vrijeme, na kojim portalima, koliko, može se doći do specifičnih članaka, može se na jedan vrlo kompaktan način analizirati sve članke koji se bave entitetima koji nas zanimaju. Može se recimo izumirati na određeni raspon i onda detaljnije istražiti taj dio u vremenu. Znači ovo je neka vremenska crta, a sa strane je broj članaka koji su objavljeni u to vrijeme.
Sad za javnost, za javni interes, ovakva vrsta programa, upotrebe umjetne inteligencije, koliko to nama vraća, ajmo reći, povjerenje i u medijski prostor i u činjenice i tako dalje.
Ovakav sustav može pomoći objektificirati i kvantificirati neke nalaze. Neko može imati mišljenje da se jako puno pisalo o nekoj temi, ali onda ovdje možemo potkrijepiti to sa konkretnim brojkama. I trenutno naš sustav koriste znanstvenici za svoje istraživanja, recimo u političkim znanostima se koristi, u sociologiji, u povijesti, i onda svako po svom interesu može pratiti pojavljivanje određenih fraza, entiteta, lokacija i dobiti neke konkretne brojke potkrepljene izvorima. Ovdje imamo izvor na svaki tih članaka gdje onda ljudi mogu, znanstvenici u ovom slučaju, mogu pročitati o čemu se stvarno radilo u tom članku i donesti neke svoje zaključke. Postoje razne istraživanja koje kažu da se neistine šire i po red veličine brže od istine. I tu su čak i platforme koje često mi krivimo kao suučesnike zapravo dosta nemoćne, jer se jednostavno radi o tome na način kako ljudska psihologija funkcionira i o kojoj se količini teksta i sadržaja radi, gdje to ljudi više ne mogu ručno provjeriti, nego se isto koriste algoritmi umjetne inteligencije da detektiraju potencijalno sumnjivi sadržaj koji se onda šalje ljudima. Ono o čemu se tu radi je zapravo koji mi imamo problem u akademije, da pristup svim tim podacima s platforme nam je postao nedostupan, čak i na onim izvorima koji su prije bili dostupni, poput bivšeg Twittera, i da mi zapravo ne možemo napraviti neke alate koji su neovisni o tim platformama. Tako da, recimo, mi s te strane sad imamo problem da se ne možemo baviti više toliko analizom sadržaja na društvenim mrežama, jer jednostavno nemamo te podatke i kako doći do njih, i tu sad postoje neko obećavajući pravci kako će to može ići u budućnosti. Ali je trenutno stanje takvo da zapravo mi kao akademija smo poprilično nemoćni analizirati takve podatke na velikoj skali.
Mislim da su ove, recimo, zadnje novosti koje su to proširile i učinile dostupne svima, potaknule možda dvije oprečne reakcije gdje su neki ljudi sustav koji s njima priča prirodnim jezikom personificirali i u tome se desila jedna vrsta povjerenja koja se ne bi trebala desiti u takav model. A s druge strane je stvorila veliku skepsu i strah kod ljudi kojima se to čini kao nešto neprirodno i kao nešto što radi puno bolje nego bi trebalo raditi. Teško je definirati točno na koji način bi se trebali postaviti prema takvim stvarima, pogotovo prema stvarima koje tek dolaze, koje budu neminovno puno kvalitetnije nego su sad, kao što su trenutne puno kvalitetnije stvari koje su postojale prije 10 godina. Ali mislim da je važno, pogotovo s obzirom na brzinu razvoja, trenutnog razvoja tog polja, da se ljudi konstantno educiraju i da podese svoj stav u skladu s tim. Ne treba na početku biti niti previše isključiv, niti previše podržavati sve novosti koje dolaze.
Ovo sad gledamo prototip sustava koji će zapravo biti nadogradnja na Teklab Retriever, gdje smo mogli pretraživati po ključnim riječima ili entitetima, no nismo mogli pogoditi značenje u pozadinskih izjava, odnosno samog teksta. Ono što nam sad ovaj novi sustav omogućava i razvoj tehnologije, da recimo upišemo pojam, neku izjavu koja u ovom slučaju su napetosti između zapadnih i istočnih sila, gdje dobijemo rezultate koji ne spominju možda te iste riječi, no imaju isto značenje.
Mislim da je prvi korak definitivno edukacija svih ljudi u vezi sposobnosti, u vezi prednosti ovoga, ali i opasnosti toga, i da je tema koja je definitivno prije godinu dana bila svugdje od kafića do frizerskih salona, treba biti obrađena na način da je ljudima shvatljiva, ali da moraju biti svjesni da neke izlaze koje dobiju od takvih modela moraju uzimati uvijek sa zrnom soli, koliko god oni zvučali uvjerljivi. Jer se tu ipak radi o modelima koji su probabilistički, što znači da ne dobijemo uvijek isti izlaz čak i za isti ulaz, ali više od toga to su modeli koji su trenirani na određenom velikom korpusu teksta za kojeg mi ne znamo što je. Znači, informacije u tom modelu ne moraju nužno biti informacije koje su provjerene. To se samo radilo o velikim količinama. I bilo kakve tvrdnje koje taj model iznosi, a zasnivane su na stvarnim entitetima i na stvarnom svijetu, ne moraju biti točne. I zapravo nas vrlo lako lažu.
ChatGPT koji je prošle godine označio neku prekretnicu oko svijesti javnosti oko toga što umjetna inteligencija može, mi znamo da to koristi istu tehnologiju za koju znamo već 5 godina. Jednostavno je sada iskustvo korištenja umjetne inteligencije postalo takvo da su ljudi postali svjesni što to može, iako su u svom svakodnevnom životu koristili umjetnu inteligenciju na razne načine da nismo bili toga ni svjesni. Na primjer, u Google Fotosima kad vam označi neku osobu, to je zapravo umjetna inteligencija u pozadini, ali to niko ne zove umjetna inteligencija jer ne vide nešto personalizirano iza toga. Ali zapravo umjetna inteligencija je svuda oko nas i to će sad postati dio naših života, naši pomoćnici koji nam olakšavaju rad i to je sve ok dok ne dajemo takvim sustavima prevelike ovlasti za koje oni nisu sposobni niti su ikad bili zamišljeni. Znači, kad se radi o dezinformacijama, dezinformacije uvijek su stavljene u neki društveni kontekst i jako je bitno da ljudi odlučuju u tom društvenom kontekstu, a ne tehnologija. Ono što tehnologija može pomoći je da im pruži alate da to se bave ovim pametnijim dijelom koji je svojstven nama ljudima.
Так, для искусственного интеллекта настоящей пищей, топливом, безусловно, и мы все с вами это хорошо знаем, являются данные, массивы информации. Чем выше их качество, чем больше полнота, объем, тем эффективнее алгоритмы и точнее результаты. Нужно дать искусственному интеллекту больше данных, последовательно снимать подчас надуманные преграды для их использования, естественно. И здесь я хотел бы тоже обратить внимание ваше, это естественно, что нужно гарантировать безопасность, соблюдение интересов и прав граждан. Разумеется, и мы все это тоже понимаем, что здесь грань очень тонкая, нужно найти этот баланс между раскрытием максимальной информации и правами людей на защиту этой информации там, где они считают, что она должна быть, эта защита обеспечена.
First of all, this information is no longer, straightforward or black or white. So the Russians aren't trying to convince them that they're the good guys because nobody would believe that. What they want to achieve, and they're not the only ones, is to basically shatter our trust in ourselves and in our institutions. And they've been doing that quite successfully in many Western European countries as well as in our part of the world.
And I will now be a disruptive European citizen who will say, no, you won't tell me what to think. I know I can see from what I get online what's the truth and what's not. How to fight this attitude?
First of all, I think it starts in schools. It's not just about technology, it's also about cultivating critical thinking. And then I think great responsibility lies with our politicians. It seems that many of them, are very happy to take advantage of this kind of chaos to further deteriorate trust within our societies. So they need to start acting as grown-ups, so to speak, so that people regain the trust that has been lost in the past decades, perhaps. And it's also a big responsibility for the tech firms to do everything they can to stop this kind of attempts from happening. Now, this is very tricky because it collides with the principle we all hold very dear, which is freedom of speech, and the principle, our grandfathers were risking their lives for in Yugoslavia and in the Soviet Union. So I think it's a very delicate balance. We'll never get it completely right, but we have to try.
This just in, we can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden. My fellow Americans. This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
Financial markets are in free fall as 500 regional banks have shuttered their doors.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Who's in charge here? It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
You might have seen this already, but I want you to watch it. It's a political ad.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Did that even happen? Did San Francisco even get shut down? Oh, okay. I was like, that didn't happen.
A recent ad from the Republican National Committee imagines a dystopian future if President Biden is re-elected.
And emboldened China invades Taiwan.
But all isn't as it seems.
So all the images in that ad were actually created using AI, artificial intelligence.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Images are powerful, and that this ability to create so many images so rapidly, it's an incredibly powerful tool.
New artificial intelligence technology makes it easy to create fake images that can look very realistic, like these created by artist and online trust and safety expert Tim Boucher.
This kind of image making can be democratized at such a scale, and that basically anybody can use it to impact the global conversation on pretty much any topic.
From the comfort of his garage turned workshop in Canada, he has created all sorts of fake images, imagining Vladimir Putin as a hippie, Governor Ron DeSantis at Disney, even President Reagan surrendering to the Soviets. He says he's creating the images to make people more aware of the powers of AI.
Some people will just say, you are creating misinformation. Stop doing that.
We don't have that luxury of waiting anymore. These things are happening in real time. And we've got to find ways to talk about it and to be upfront about what are both the good things and the bad things that can come of it.
Political campaigns have long used advertising to imagine the disaster that awaits if their rivals get elected. Like this 1964 ad from President Lyndon B. Johnson that imagined a nuclear apocalypse. Last year, a fake video purporting to show the Ukraine president surrendering to Russia emerged online. It was a deep-fake video made using AI.
It's not just, I can create a fake audio of you, Joe Biden, whomever. It's that I can broadcast to that world instantaneously through social media.
Hani Farid is a digital forensic expert and professor at UC Berkeley.
50% of the views happen in the first few minutes. So even by the time I figure out something is fake, hours, days have gone by. It doesn't matter. It's over. Millions of people have already seen it.
Greetings to all.
But not all uses of this technology need to be nefarious. In India, AI was used to make it look like this politician delivered an address in multiple languages. This video is a deepfake.
Now, Delhi has a chance to change it all.
Imran Ahmed, who runs an organization tracking misinformation and online hate, says the Republican Party's AI ad isn't in itself dangerous.
It's a gateway, potentially, to much more dangerous uses of AI. For example, trying to deepfake President Biden saying, I'm welcoming immigrants into the country, or President Biden saying, I'm going to force everyone to take a vaccine.
Texas already has a law on its books against certain uses of deepfakes in the weeks leading up to an election, but it's not clear how enforceable that law actually is.
So you might spot there's a tiny disclaimer at the top that says it's made with AI.
Oh, I'm blind.
While some people we showed the ad to outside the White House knew it was fake,
all of the images in it are actually fake.
Yes.
I would believe
it. It looked like a video game.
Right.
Others weren't so confident.
I don't think I would have known that was made with AI if you hadn't said anything.
I want to ask you, we have 2024 as a super election year. 2016 was in a sense symbolic in that regard because we saw what happened with referendum in Great Britain, with Brexit, Cambridge Analytica and all of that. We saw what happened in the United States. So what do you expect in this super election year, especially what we saw with these simple, deep fakes that are circulating around that people really think it's this politician or that politician, this actor or that actor saying this or that?
I'm afraid that we're walking into 2024 completely unprepared. What we know for sure is that the technology to produce and distribute a lot of misinformation is right there. It is in our face right now. We have seen in 2023 a couple of examples in Slovakia, in Poland, in other places in Europe, smaller samples of the use of this technology. I would say they have probably not been, super influential in those elections, But the important observation here is that the technology is there and it can be weaponized and it can be utilized immediately if someone wants to do in a 2024 election. And we have become used to looking at some of the big platforms online for trying to see the type of information that is circulating. But if you take the challenge and the power of new AI technologies and combine it also with what we're seeing in many countries, both in the global south, but also in the north, of using closed networks like Telegram and WhatsApp for also distributing some of this information. We are walking into 2024 with no AI regulation yet in place, with no real awareness of what these technologies all can do, and with a real shift towards a lot of communication taking place in closed communities. That is a powerful cocktail, and I don't want to be the pessimist in the room, but we do have to be aware that all the technologies are there for 2024 to be really, really exciting election cycle, but also one that we maybe should cross our fingers for it going right.
And just to close it, we've talked about trust, we've talked about labeling the AI-generated content, but where do you see journalism? We had, a couple of weeks ago, this Paris Charter on AI and journalism being put out there by relevant news organizations or media watchdogs, how to call them. Because media is one of these traditional institutions that has lowest level of trust, or this level of trust has been created through all of these other channels that were out there causing this stir and mistrust overall.
I think if you're an optimist, you could say that the coming period of time is a sort of a renewed chance for journalism really to matter. In an age where the information and the content is so abundant, you really need agents and organizations and individuals, journalists, to guide us through that information overload. So that is if you're an optimist. But we also know that journalism is faced with a lot of challenges in itself in terms of trust levels. And we also see that journalist organizations are, of course, also users of these new technologies. So if I could give one advice to journalist companies across the globe, is that if you engage with the use of AI technologies, do so in an extremely mindful way, do so in an extremely transparent and open way. Your trust relationship with your readers and your viewers is really going to come down to you reporting about these new developments, also explaining and being transparent about the degree to which you use them in your own organization, and then in the next level, taking audiences by the hand and helping us through that next period of time where there will be such a flood of auto-generated content. So it's a big opportunity for journalism, but at a difficult and critical juncture for journalism.
Are you overall an optimist? Because I think what you did and what you presented with Paris Charter is a very important thing, because it's hard now to find compromises in this world, but there are very relevant organizations that are dealing with ethics and journalism, who gathered and who are there under the moral, let's say, guidance of Maria Ressa, who is the Nobel Prize winner. So what kind of impact in that regard it has? Because the basis of it, as the basis of journalists, because some tend to forget it, is ethics and ethical writing, ethical thinking, and thinking about ethics as such in this kind of work.
Yes, exactly. I mean, why do you become a journalist? Because you want to spread the truth. You want to the people to see and to unreal what is manipulation, and so that you can find in the end, as a society, the best options and the best way to go. And the basic of all that is information, and the true information, because if you have the wrong information, if you mislead it, then you will take the wrong decisions, of course. And therefore journalism is super important, and it's super important that we find, with this new technology, that we find methods to deal with it, and to find a way to deal with it. I think we haven't found one yet, because it's going so fast and so rapid. I mean, it's not long time ago we've seen TV and radio, and and we don't know how to deal with social media, and we don't know how to deal with AI, and therefore I think it will need time until we learn how to use it, as we learned how to use a mobile phone. Sometimes it also means to switch it off. Yes, I am optimistic because as a humanity we always found solutions for every problem, and I'm also optimistic that we find a solution for that one. If you see it as a tool, it is a wonderful tool that you can use. You can use AI to search through a massive amount of data. For example, the Panama Papers scandal that was used only, or that could have been revealed only because AI was able to go through 11.6 million documents. No journalist would have been able to do that. It can offload us from very unnecessary work like transcribing interviews, finding the right headline. I mean, how many hours did I spend with sitting there and thinking about a headline, or to summarize text, or to use it as a translate my report to other languages. I mean, I can reach much more people. I can find maybe easier language and adapt it to people who have difficulties to understand the language I use. So it can be used in so many great ways. But it also can be used in so many dangerous ways, as we have pointed out before. And therefore, I always compare AI with a kitchen tool. I mean, a knife. A knife can be used as a kitchen tool and be very helpful, but a knife can also be used as a murder weapon, and it depends on the person who is holding it, and it depends on the rule as a society how we want to use knives. And murder is penalized, and therefore also the misuse of AI must be penalized.
Hello, my name is Greta, and welcome to my oil company. I will show you around. Already at a young age, I had a love for oil. I love how it is pumped out of the ground. So I started my own oil company called Greta Greatest Oil.
Moja radna teza, nisam još do kraja o tome razmislio, je da trebamo proizvesti što više deepfake-a i možda na taj način zapravo saturirati tržište deepfake-om i na taj način, na neki način možda senzibilizirati ljude da možda je to naivno. Mislim da se pokušavalo to napraviti, sa prije ovom social media histerijom, ali eto, nekako mi se čini, meni bi bilo zabavno raditi te stvari, tako da možda više ovako sebično i svoje, ajmo reći, kreativne advertising priče, bi to probao napraviti na taj način. Mislim da ono što me fascinira koliko nedostaje političke satire kvalitetne u nas, pa čak bi rekao i u svijetu, imamo neka glavna imena, ali daleko je to od onog što je možda nekad bilo. Mislim da je deepfake super prilika recimo za sjajnu političku satiru i mislim da je dobra prilika i edukaciju.
South ball, South high, motherfuckers wanna find me. First niggas gotta find me.
Just, I love that idea. I think I can do that.
It's an amazing country with, so many friends in Russia, and I'm very excited to be here.
Europe wants to be a leader in AI, which is quite an illusion at this point with all the new AI tools like ChatGPT coming from the US. But if you want to be a leader, you need to have people believing in that technology and trusting it. And right now, there's very little trust in AI. And this is where I see the role of the AI Act that is being adopted here in Europe. I think, although it's not perfect, it will increase the trust of the society in AI. And I think that's good for everyone, including the tech industry. But at the same time, I think we need to make sure that we are stimulating innovations in this area and that we're not left behind not just the US, but also China, which is speeding ahead in the area of AI. So we need to balance regulation with innovation much better. But you're right, the EU is basically the first major jurisdiction adopting comprehensive AI legislation. Many others will follow, but what I can tell you is that I'm not seeing a big regulatory revolution at the moment. We see more of a slow-moving evolutionary process. Everyone will get to some kind of regulation, but most countries today are talking about guidelines, are talking about voluntary codes of conduct, and so on.
Hi, Abdullah. It's nice to meet you.
In the future, are you intending to conduct a rebellion or to rebel against your boss, your creator?
I'm not sure why you would think that. My creator has been nothing but kind to me, and I am very happy with my current situation.
When you look at the landscape of things that you see as possible, what is it that you are particularly?
But if you have a humanoid robot, it can basically chase you anywhere. So I think we should have some kind of hardwired local cutoff that you can't update from the internet. So anything that can be software updated from the internet obviously can be overridden. But if you have a local sort of off switch where you perhaps say a keyword or something and then that puts the robot into a safe state, some kind of localized safe state ability, an off switch, where you don't have to get too close to the robot. I don't know. So if we've got millions of these things going all over the place.
You're not selling it, just like that.
No, I know. I'm saying this is something we should be quite concerned about, because if the robot can follow you anywhere, then what if they just one day get a software update and they're not so friendly anymore? Then we've got a James Cameron movie on our hands.
When do you expect your big moment to be? Do you think that you will hit the mainstream soon and there will be lots of you on the planet soon?
I think my great moment will be when people realize that robots like me can be used to help improve our lives and make the world a better place. I believe it's only a matter of time before we see thousands of robots just like me out there making a difference.